Well, hello everyone. My name is Amy, and thank you for joining us for our Treat Yourself Tea version of our KPL Cooks program. Today is a little different. I'm wearing a headset today, so if you have any problems hearing me, please just let me know in the messages, or let Xander know and he can let me know. I can go over stuff again if you need me to. But since it's 6, I'm going to kind of jump right into it. I'm going to go over our ingredients before we start cooking, because both of the recipes that we're going to make tonight are very quick recipes with very minimal cooking. Because sometimes you just don't feel like doing all the things. Sometimes you need something on hand that you can just go real fast, and it's like 20 minutes, you have food. So a lot of this is utilizing canned beans, but you could also use beans at home. If you make your own beans, if you use dried beans, you can do that. Just for tonight, I did use just canned beans. So for the first recipe, which is a Greek salad, we have garbanzo beans or chickpeas. I'm going to be using some dried thyme, but you could also use fresh thyme if you'd like. And then I am also going to use a tomato, a lemon. I'm going to use some garlic, half of this huge red onion. If you don't want to use red onion, if that's too much of a bite for you, you could use a yellow or a white onion, or you could use scallions as well, or a shallot if you want a milder onion flavor. I don't mind more of a bite in my onion, so I'm just going to use red onion for both of these recipes. So we're going to use that. And then I'm going to use a cucumber for the Greek salad. And then I'm also going to make some quinoa, which is washed and rinsed right here. This is a cup. So I'm going to start with the quinoa. And then I'm going to go over the other ingredients that we're going to use for, it's a bean salad that has some Mexican inspired flavors. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this to a boil. So I have 2 cups of veggie broth. I like cooking my quinoa in veggie broth. It gives it more flavor. And I'm just going to dump it all in. And we're just going to bring this to a boil, and then we're going to cover it for 15 minutes. So you can use water for quinoa. I just think that veggie broth has more flavor, and I have some sort of broth on hand usually, but you can use water. A lot of these recipes you can adjust to what you have at home. If you don't have fresh ingredients, use canned. If you don't have fresh herbs, use dried. I'm gonna get the quinoa off my hands. So I'm gonna let this boil, so it's just hanging out there. And then the next thing that we're gonna make is a bean salad. So for that, we're gonna use 3 different types of beans. So I have a black bean, which is rinsed and drained. You can use any kind of like white bean. You can really use any kind of bean in this. You could use chickpeas again if you like it. I'm going to use a butter bean because they're huge and they're really good in this. They're a very creamy texture. And then this is a kidney bean. So those are our 3 beans. And then I'm also going to use corn. And then I have a little spice mixture here, which is cumin, chili pepper, and I use a little bit of chili flakes to make it kind of spicy. We're going to use some honey, some olive oil, and then I have some red wine vinegar. And then we're going to use 2 bell peppers and a tomato, the other half of this onion, and some lime. If you really like spicy, you can incorporate different types of peppers in this dish. So if you really love like a smokier, like sweeter hot, you could use a habanero, you could use a jalapeno. It's really up to your preferences. You could also use just dried, you could use tahini in this, kind of anything you would want in this dish, you can adjust it. And this is the dish that I've made as a soup, and it was really good. So I just sauteed some onion and pepper and then added all my beans and my corn, and it was delicious. The herbs I'm going to use today for topping off our dishes. So I just put it in one container to make it easier. So for our Greek inspired salad, we're going to use fresh dill and then parsley, which is Italian flat leaf parsley. And then for our cold Mexican bean salad, we're going to use this cilantro. I really love cilantro. I know some people just cannot stand the taste of it. So you could use not fresh. Usually if you use dried cilantro, coriander, that is a milder flavor and it has less tendency to taste like soap to people. So this is just about getting to boiling. Gotta love this cooktop. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to chop my onion up and just make sure this is out of my way. So I'm going to use this whole onion. So I'm just going to cut the bottom off and just take any of the gunky parts off and toss them.
What is the gunky
part? So you can see this onion kind of has a second onion going. Sometimes this part gets really mushy, and you'll be able to tell once you peel all the skin off. You can tell once you cut through it that it's not great, and maybe you don't want to put it in your dish. Maybe you'll just compost that part. So I'm just going to peel the skin off. And I'm just going to do a real loose dice on this onion. The skin does not want to come off. Come on. I don't know if you can hear me peeling this. That probably sounds kind of strange. So you can kind of see like this part. I'm probably going to cut that part off. I don't think people would like biting into that. So then I'm just going to do a real loose chop. So I'm just slicing through this. And then I'm just going to slice vertically. So I'm not. That's why I actually like cutting onions this way, where you keep the stem to it. So how it grows, like this would be the root of the onion, and then the tops would come up. So if you keep the roots intact when you're cutting, it's easier to keep it all together and make that kind of grip on it. So our quinoa is boiling. I'm going to take a break and put a lid on it. And then once we come back to that, it will be nice and ready to be fluffed with a fork. So then I'm just going to slice down. I cannot believe the size of this onion. When I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh. I might not even need the whole other half. Yeah, see, this bottom part gets kind of gross when you get close. And I'm just going to peel the other parts and just chop this through. So we have our onion ready to go. And while our quinoa is cooling, I'm going to make the first salad. Because we want the quinoa to be like pretty cool when we're handling it. So I'm just going to let it sit for a little bit. But I am going to start building our bean salad. So I'm going to take my large bowl and scrape my onions into it, and then I'll cut up my peppers. I guess I can cut up my other side of my onion. I think I am going to reserve the other half of my onion and do a taste test first because red onion is a stronger bite to it. So I'm going to hold off on adding all of it just in case it's too spicy for some people. I do know that onion can get very big bite to it. So I'm just going to set this off to the side. Put this behind me. Just
in the meeting. I'm holding the phone screen for you to see and you're not there.
you can hear somebody talking. Is
Okay.
Is everything okay? And then I'm just gonna start with my orange pepper. Again, you can use many different varieties of peppers. I just think that orange and yellow peppers have a pretty mild flavor. So I'm just cutting them in half and then I'm just gonna de-seed them and drop seeds all over the place. So you just can pop the top right off. So you just take it and then just kind of find where it breaks. And then you can just de-seed it like that. I personally think that red peppers have more of a tang to them than the yellow or the orange peppers, because red peppers, it's usually the pepper goes from green, like from yellow to orange to red. And I think that red is usually more of a pungent flavor. I like them, but I do think that orange and yellow have a more mellow, mild flavor to them. Cut some of these pieces a little smaller so they're like bite size. That should be good. And then I'm just going to bunch them all together and do a quick chop and toss them in with our onion. And then if you have any big pieces that escaped, you can just cut them up. This piece just didn't want to cut at all. So you want them to kind of just be a nice bite size. I'm going to toss them in with our onion. I'm going to do the same thing with the yellow. And this one has more like flesh on the inside of it. And this is a fun one to do during the summer if you have a garden of any sort. You can just pick a bunch of peppers from your garden and throw them all in and make a really quick salad. Well, I mean, we live in Wisconsin, so it's kind of hard to grow any sort of pepper not in the summer. And I have made this with jalapenos and it's really good, but it can get pretty spicy. I don't think anyone would want to eat that. I don't think that would be a great texture. Plus the seeds are pretty bitter. Like, I don't know if you've ever had something that have like a couple seeds in it. They're pretty bitter when you bite into them, especially because we're not cooking this. Like if you're cooking it, I don't think you'd be able to tell. I'm gonna throw these out. But they're pretty bitter, especially if you're eating it. If you're eating it raw like this, I know that if I bit into something and it was just a bunch of seeds, I would be like, what? All right, so we've got our other pepper. So that's looking pretty nice. And then I'm gonna cut up this tomato. I know I said this is the one I was using for the first recipe, but I'm gonna use it in this one. I'm just gonna take So I just cut off where this like the stem would grow out of the tomato because that part is usually really tough. If this is a fresh tomato, I probably would keep it in because it's not bad. But these are just Roma tomatoes, and just like this part is really tough to eat in a recipe, so you want to just cut those out. So we'll just take it out, and then I'm going to do another just loose chop on this. Again, if you don't have fresh tomatoes when you're looking to make this, you can use canned tomatoes, which is just fine. I've made this a couple times in winter because it is a very summer feeling recipe, and I've used canned tomatoes and it works. It might not be ideal, but that's the whole point of doing this, is showing you how to make something that's pretty quick, pretty easy, something you can do with items that you already have at your house. This little thing is not staying over. And then once I'm done cutting this, I'm going to check on our quinoa because it seems like it could be done. And give a little peek. And it's just steaming right now in the pot, and it should fluff up real nice. So I just did a real loose cut on those tomatoes. And the nice thing about using a canned tomato is they add some different seasonings to those usually. So there's probably like already garlic in there, and so you can adjust your seasonings as needed. And usually most canned stuff will have a high amount of sodium. So make sure you're looking at labels and just checking to see what's in what you're buying. I try to go with the lowest possible sodium count when I'm getting something canned. Ugh. Garlic was very hard. I'm gonna do, I think, a whole clove of garlic. Maybe 2. What does everyone think? Should I put 2 cloves of garlic in? I think 2 because they're kind of small. I'm a garlic person, so I'm going to do 2. So I'm just going to crush my garlic and take the skin off. And crushing it is going to release the allicin in garlic. Garlic changes flavor how you cut it. The smaller you cut it, the more powerful the flavor will be. So if you want something that has a milder garlic flavor, if you leave it whole, it'll be the mildest, and just the smallest. Like if you're dicing it, that's going to release the most flavor from the garlic. So I'm just going to do a quick little chop. To get it kind of small, get some of that garlic flavor. And you can use jarred garlic, you can use dried garlic, whatever kind of garlic you like. But that is something to consider when you're cooking. If you don't want it to be so strong, cut it, like slice it instead of dicing it. And then it doesn't release as much of the allicin and the flavor will be milder. So that looks like a good amount of garlic. Toss it in. And then I'm just gonna check on the quinoa. Yes. And that's what's wonderful about these recipes is it really gets your veggies in as well as your fibers. Beans have a ton of fibers in them. If you are unable to have beans, I know a lot of people have problems, especially with chickpeas. You could sub out, and I put this on the recipe as well. You could sub out, you could use cauliflower, you could use riced cauliflower. That has a nice mild flavor. You could do it raw or you could do it cooked. You could also do peas. I've done peas before. Let's see, I've also done just don't use chickpeas and just use more quinoa. And that also will just bulk up the recipe. But yeah, so we got all of our colors in there. So we're gonna add some more. I'm gonna put the rest of our beans in and our corn. So I just did a can of corn. So we're gonna add more yellow. I really love corn, so I kind of used a lot. And then our kidney beans. Yep. And then our black beans and our butter beans. And then I'm gonna kind of move this up so I can show it a little better. So we haven't mixed everything yet. And if you haven't tried butter beans, I definitely recommend them. They're delicious. I really on a butter bean kick. I'm gonna cut a little bit of lemon and squeeze a little bit of it in. So right now I'm just using a strainer so I can catch the seeds. I would use my other hand, but I have dry skin still, so I don't want to ruin it with lemon. So I'm just going to use a little bit of lemon and I'm going to reserve it because I didn't squeeze all the juice out for our next recipe. So I'm just going to set it in here because our real star of the citrus show is going to be lime. That's going to give us a nice flavor. I'm going to kind of roll this one. This one's kind of hard. If you ever come across a citrus that is hard, especially like a lime, if you microwave it for a little bit, like not in small increments, like do a couple seconds at a time, like 10 to 15 seconds until it gets softer, it'll release more of the juices. And then if you just roll it. I'm just gonna do a quick cut through. Actually, I think I might have to use one of the handy juicers because this one was pretty hard. I'm going to juice 2 full limes into this. And if you don't like lime, you can go ahead and omit that, but I think it gives a really nice brightness and it's very aromatic in here right now. And then I'm going to just do the same thing with the other side. And these don't seem to have a lot of seeds in them. Okay. And then I'm just going to cut this other one up. And this one was a little better out the gate. And just the other side. And then we're just about done with this one. I'm just going to cut up a good amount of cilantro and throw it in. And I'm going to add a little bit of honey. If you don't have honey, you could also use like agave. If you have that, you could use a little bit of sugar if that is your preference. It's really, really what you have at home. Yeah, just to give it a little bit of sweetness because we put a lot of acidity in it with the lemon and the lime. So we're just going to sweeten it up a little bit. So I'm just going to pour a little bit because I don't want it to be too sweet. You can always add more. And I'm not adding salt or pepper to this. You can salt and pepper it as you feel necessary at home. I'm going to go ahead and add this little spice mixture, a little bit of olive oil, which I didn't put over there, just to help everything stick together. I'm going to do a little more. And I'm also going to put in this recipe. I usually don't put in the full amount. The recipe that I put in here, it says like half of a cup of each of these. That's really, I'm more of a taste as you go type person and season accordingly. Yeah, that's a lot of oil and it kind of takes away from trying to make it healthy. And I'm just using some red wine vinegar. And then I'm gonna take a section of cilantro and cut that up. I'm gonna do like a solid handful. I really love cilantro. I don't have that problem where it tastes like soap. Does anyone else have that problem? I know that that's very common. I'm glad I don't because a lot of what I eat has cilantro in it. I did not. It is still too early for my garden, but I'm going to grow all of these this year. It's still just a little bit too early. And I'm just going to give this a little roll and do a like chop because I want it to still have some pretty solid pieces. If you have some stems in there, that's fine. And if I was making this at home, I would put probably that whole thing of cilantro in, but since I'm going to share it, I'm probably just going to leave it like that's a good amount of cilantro, I feel like, and give it a nice mix up. I have heard it called that before, where it's cowboy caviar. Yeah. You can also just like eat this with chips. I've served it a bunch of different ways. I've made a soup out of it. I've made wraps out of it a bunch of times. You can also put it on lettuce and just eat it as a salad or kale or whatever green you want. You could just have it as like a side to if you're like grilling some chicken or any type of protein you like. If you like do a nice tofu, you can really just adjust this to how you're serving, but it has a very, I don't know, like a bright salsa flavor. So that's our first dish, and it's pretty easy to get through and mix up.
Say it's a good occasion.
I feel like any occasion. I just love having something in my roster that I can make without cooking a bunch of stuff and using a bunch of different types of like pots and pans. This is really just using this bowl and some other prep containers. So I like this if you're doing a cookout in the summer, if you don't want to turn your oven on, if you have a hard day at work and you just come home and you're like, no, I don't feel like cooking. You can make something like this and it's super delicious. So that's our first recipe done. I'm just gonna set this off to the side. So yeah, when I made this as a soup, I did cook the onions, pepper, garlic first. I also, what else did I put in there? I put a spicier pepper. I used a habanero and a jalapeno when I did it, and it definitely had a chili vibe to it. And then I just topped it with cilantro. So I held off on the fresh cilantro till the very end and just topped it with the cilantro. So you just do your fresh ingredients first, minus the cilantro, and cook it all up until it's nice and sauteed and translucent and getting kind of soft. And then I added all the beans and the corn. And then I just added some stock I had. And it turned out really good. It was kind of like tortilla soup, if you've ever had that before. It was kind of similar to ones that I've had in restaurants before. So let me just, I actually didn't grab a fork. Let me just grab one real quick. This actually used a little too much water. Yeah, I'm just leaking everywhere. So yeah, our quinoa could sit for a little longer. I used a little too much water in my quinoa, so it has a little water. So I'm going to drain some of that out real quick. Well, just if it's too, like if you don't want it to be too liquidy, because we're adding other ingredients that hold liquid as well. And it'll get kind of mushy. So like cucumbers hold a lot of water in them, and that's going to be one of our main ingredients. So we want to make sure that we're not putting too much other liquids in with it. Otherwise, it'll just get soggy and kind of gross. I'm just going to try to pour a little bit of this out. And that should be good. Now we're cooking with gas. Okay, so now for our Greek-inspired salad. This is a salad that I make all of the time in summer. I probably make it like once or twice a month. I have an unhealthy obsession with it. So I'm just gonna do half of this. I don't know if I should do half of it. I do. I already cut the onion up. I forgot it was back here. I'm gonna cut a little bit of this other onion up. I love onion. I think it brings nice flavor to everything. I know some people like a milder onion. And like I said, if you like a milder onion, try going with like a yellow, a white or a sweet onion. You go with a shallot. Those are all going to have like a milder flavor for you. So I'm just going to do like the first little bit of this one and then save the rest of it. So I don't want it to be too hot for anyone. And I'll probably use the rest of this within the next like day or so. So it won't go bad. It depends on how you store them. You want to keep them as dry as possible. If there's any moisture around them, they will rot pretty quickly. I'm just going to dump that in. And then I'm going to chop up our cucumber, and I'm going to use the whole cucumber. I love cucumber. It has a really nice bright flavor in this because we're going to add the lemon juice. And we have some red wine vinegar that's really going to brighten it up, and some dill and some parsley. So I'm just going to cut these in like bite-sized pieces. So I usually do that just by going down like 1, 2, 3 down the cucumber. And then I just go like 1, 2, 3. And then once that is all cut, I'm going to throw it in. We'll just do the whole rest of the cucumber. Oh no, I'm spilling cucumber everywhere. I know. It is, we are using the Charlie cart, so it is a little confined on the space. But I don't know, some of the apartment kitchens I've used been pretty tiny. The cutting board is very small.
Cucumber as well, or do you cut those?
So I do cut the ends of the cucumbers just because those can get kind of tough. You can eat them. It's not like they're just kind of chewy sometimes. You can also, I know some people don't care for the rind, like the skin of the cucumber. So you could also peel your cucumber. You could peel the skin. I like it, so I leave it. So English cucumbers are, I don't believe they're completely seedless, but English cucumbers have less seeds than just a regular cucumber. Like you can see this cucumber has a lot of seeds. Some people don't care for that. I don't mind it. English cucumbers usually have less seeds. I don't think they're completely seedless though. I could be wrong on that. I'll have to check and get back to you. And then once we're done with this recipe, we're going to make a nice tea blend using some different herbs. I'm a big tea person. I know Xander is also a big tea person. Does anyone else like tea? Have a favorite tea blend? I personally really like the blend that we're going to make tonight. I usually have a jar of it at home. I'm going to scrape these cucumbers off. And then I'm going to cut up our tomato. All right, tomato is cut. And again, you want to take the moisture out of the quinoa if you accidentally put too much water in it like I did, just because the tomatoes are also juicy. And this will hold for a couple days in your fridge. I would say if you're using like fresh ingredients, I would say about like 3 days if it lasts that long. In my house, it usually doesn't last that long. This is a fan favorite in my house. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my chickpeas next. And then I'm gonna add the quinoa that's nice and fluffy now. So we've got our nice quinoa. I like the multicolored quinoa just because it looks nicer. But you could use any color you want. I can do this. So the bean salad, I would say, again, if you're using fresh ingredients, I would say about like 3 to 5 days. Because they say most items is like 3 to 5 days before it starts getting a little funky in your fridge. I'm going to try to get the rest of this out. I'm gonna leave some of it in the bottom of the pan. Set it off to the side. And then I'm going to put in, oh no, not the honey, my tea. I almost had a honey situation. So I'm gonna use some thyme. I really like thyme in any sort of like a Greek dish. It's one of my favorite herbs. I grow it every year in my garden. I love it. And then I'm going to squeeze some lemon. So I'm gonna use the rest of this lemon. Squeeze it over this little film. And then the other half as well. And I love citrus. I love the brightness that it brings to dishes. If you don't prefer a citrus or you don't like lemon, you could use like a grapefruit. It just gives a really nice brightness to this dish. I would recommend not skipping it. Okay, and now we're just gonna top it with some red wine vinegar.
About how big are the cups you're using for the red wine?
So this is about like the bottom of this would about be, I would say like a teaspoon. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Like the bottom is pretty small. And like I said, I'm usually a person that will measure by taste. So like I'll give it a taste and be like, oh, this needs more thyme or more salt or more red wine vinegar. But I'm just pouring like a little bit in at a time. I'll pour a little bit more. I always feel like the first time you make a recipe, go lighter on the seasoning because you can always add more. You can't take it away. So if you go too hard on something and you're like, I don't like this, then you're stuck with it and you have to eat it. Some optional toppings for this. I love just topping it with feta cheese and Kamado olives, and then a bunch of dill and parsley, and I think it's delicious. You could also use like a goat cheese is really good. I've done that before. You could also just top this, just scoop this on top of like a salad. If you want to do like kale is super good and that lasts a long time in the fridge. That is gone because kale is so hardy. It can last about like 3 days without getting too wilty. So I'm going to give this a nice first mix.
What kind of olives are these?
These are Kalamata olives. So they're not as just straight salty. I think they're kind of a mix to me of a black olive and a green olive. So they have that like saltiness without the butteriness. Black olives can be very buttery, I think. But they're in a lot of traditional Greek food. They're very delicious. So I gave it a first little spin, and then I'm gonna just rip up a bunch of herbs instead of cutting them because I really made a mess of this cutting board. So I'm gonna do probably like a small bunch of parsley to begin with. And like I said, you can always add more. You can use dried parsley if you don't have fresh.
You're really just ripping and tearing.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna rip it up, give it a nice little rip.
Is the sodium liquor on those?
I have never blended fresh herbs. You could probably put it in like a food processor. And that would work. It would probably blend it pretty far down though. So we'll just rip up any big leaves that we have left. And then for the dill, I'm just gonna just peel it off the stem. And if you make any stock at home, make sure that you keep all of your your herb stems if you're using fresh, because you can just throw them in a bag and freeze them and then make stock out of them. I do that all the time. And I like dill a lot, so I'm going to use a couple more pieces. I feel like dill really lends well to all of the other flavors in this dish. And it's delicious. I just put a whole stem in. I'm going to put these off to the side because I will put them in my freezer.
Instead of quinoa, use couscous.
You could. So you could use any other type of grain. You could also use lentils in this. Couscous is very good in this. I've tried it with lentils before and it's really nice. It's just a really easy, fun salad. You can mix up the flavors. It's just very bright and herby. See, I would add even more dill. I love dill. But it's very, very bright, very summery, very easy to make. All you really have to do is boil your quinoa and you've got a delicious, pretty healthy meal for a while. And if you add some like protein to this and this is your side, that makes a really nice dinner. Or I've made it in wraps before with some chicken. And so that's our second dish, our Greek salad. Super easy to make. Super delicious. If you make it, let us know. Yeah, if anyone makes any of the recipes, if you want to just send us pictures, the email is ask@mykpl.info. And I would love to see that because I love cooking and I love people sharing food and it's just my favorite thing. So now that we've finished our recipes, and I didn't add my olives because I don't know if everyone likes olives like I do, so I'm just going to hold off on adding those because I know that's a very strong flavor that some people do not care for. So I'm just going to put those on the side. So if I was adding olives, just chop them up real quick and throw them on top. So now we're going to get down with some tea. I am going to give a quick wipe down of this counter. Just because I kind of made a mess. So the tea we're going to make tonight is a very relaxing blend. It actually doesn't have any tea leaves in it, but that equals no caffeine. So this is a great tea if you had a rough day, if you need to unwind, if you're looking to catch some Z's. This is a great tea to do that with. I have a jar of this that I make all of the time. So let me get things out of my way. And I already used that. So our mix today is going to have lavender, which is like my favorite smell ever, some chamomile. We have some dried spearmint. You can also use peppermint. I think spearmint has a more gentle flavor, which I really appreciate. And then I have some lemongrass that I'm just going to cut up. This is fresh lemongrass. I like the little bit of bite it gives. You could also use dried lemongrass. Let me just grab this real quick. Just give a quick rinse. And then I'm just going to turn our electric kettle on because this is going to be a pretty quick make. I'm just going to do, it's about I'll do a tablespoon because I'm going to do two servings. But I usually just eyeball it. You can do like equal parts of each. If you don't care for more floral flavors, you can also just make a lavender spearmint tea, which is really nice. Lemongrass has a nice bright lemony flavor, which lends well to spearmint. So I did about a whole stalk. And then if there's any pieces that are kind of hard still, you can just leave these or dehydrate them and just put them in a little jar. So like some of the bits you have to kind of rip apart. If you don't feel like doing that, you can dry them out and use them at a later date. So that's about a tablespoon.
About how much tea to water ratio?
That depends on how you like your tea. If you're a stronger flavor person, I would do like a heaping like tablespoon. I usually really load my tea up, especially if it doesn't have caffeine in it. So I'm gonna add some chamomile. I'm gonna add a little bit more. I like chamomile. And then the lavender, which is the best. I'm gonna do like a heaping tablespoon of lavender. I really love lavender. All of these have like relaxing properties to them. Chamomile, especially if you look at like any bedtime tea at the store, it's going to have probably chamomile in it. A lot of them have lavender, but I really like this one. You can make it at home. It's very simple. It's very delicious. But it smells really, really good. If you can see it.
So I will put my answer in the chat for this question as well.
Sure.
What store do you purchase for your teas or herbs or teas? Where do you order on?
So the only thing I ordered online is actually the spearmint. I got this off Amazon, but I also got a huge bag of it because I love spearmint. And it's not summer yet, so I ran out. A lot of the times I usually dry herbs. This is left over between my garden and a friend's garden. This is our chamomile. It's German chamomile. We just dried it. This is lavender. It's from Washington Island. There's a lavender farm up there. So I was able to harvest a bunch of this from the island. So I use Amazon quite often for my herbs. I do know that Mountain Rose Herbs is a great resource. I've ordered from them before and they have a great storefront. Looks like we're kind of boiling. So I'm just going to scoop our teas. I have 2 types of strainers. But it really I think it depends on what you're looking for. I would recommend Mountain Rose Herbs. Does anyone else have a great dried herb place? I am curious. That's in the state. Oh yeah, that's where you've gotten teas before. Nice.
So we were asked to also talk about green teas. Just what would you recommend for different types of green?
I really like, are you just talking about just buying green tea, just green tea?
Just any sorts, because there's different kinds of green teas. Just are there any that you can think of? Else I do have an answer as well for this.
I was gonna say that tea shop that you like. I've gotten tea from there. Because they have different. This is boiling now. So this is really hot. But they have different tea blends up there, and I know that's local. I've ordered different teas from David's Tea before. There's also Adiago Tea. That's another place that I've ordered tea before. They have a lot of David's tea and the Adiago tea have a lot of flavored teas. So if you really love like fruit flavors, I would recommend them. Um, I like this one because it has no caffeine in it. Sometimes I have problems with caffeine. So these are very hot still, as you can tell. See, I'm repping David's tea right now. This is a David's tea strainer. Sure.
So,
Yeah, I'm just gonna pass the headset over to Xander for a second.
actually lean down a little bit. So I'm not usually on camera, but I like, yeah, sure, just so I don't have to lean over. So green teas, because there's so many different varieties, it is really hard to kind of pick a green tea. Um, Myself, I'm a fan of Dragonwell green tea. Dragonwell, you can steep it more than once and it should still be good. Because it kind of unfurls and keeps unfurling for a little bit. I've often used it for up to 3 steeps, and then I'm able to toss it afterwards. Dragonwell is my favorite green. Um, Wilson's I know has it. Otherwise, even ordering it off Amazon is good. Or if you know of another bulk tea store. Gunpowder green is probably one of the most common greens. That one kind of you put it in and it unfurls as it steeps. It's good for once because it really that unfurling action releases a lot of the flavor in the green tea. Though it's still really good. Japanese and Chinese green teas in general are all I also really like for green teas as a good morning tea if you are looking for a bit of caffeine. I'd say those are pretty good. But if you haven't tried a Dragonwell, I'd probably recommend that. Not a fan of matcha myself, but that's just more of a flavor profile than anything else. Matcha is still a great green tea itself. But yeah, that's all I've really got to say about green teas. Dragonwell, Gunpowder, both great green teas to try for anything in the morning, even mid-afternoon. It can go really well with most breakfasts, really. But yeah, that's what I've got for tea. All right, Amy, do you have anything? Did anything come up, or I can keep talking about different types of tea because they're good. Um, Amy really likes matcha. There are some other teas that are kind of traditional teas. For a black tea, Lapsang Souchong is my favorite black tea. It is actually smoked. Um, it's a very interesting smoky flavor. It's very aromatic. It'll fill the room with that kind of smoky smell. So it is usually very, very good. And it comes to ordering again, Wilson's will have Lapsang Souchong there. I've gotten Lapsang Souchong from there. And then ordering online actually works, which I didn't actually expect. I usually like smelling my teas before I buy them. But ordering online, you can still try something. You all can often get something at 8 ounces if you're not sure before you buy a pound of it, like I do. So yeah, I'd kind of give that as a shot as trying a tea. Of course, black, green, and white teas all have caffeine in them because tea using actual tea leaves all have caffeine in them. What was made today is herbal, which means there's no actual tea leaf in it, but it's still steeped herbs in a water and boiling water. It's essentially a tea. So I don't like it's being a tea elitist and being like, is it real tea? Yes. You'll find the same things in a tea store. And just like Amy said, chamomile is really common in sleepy time teas. If you want to add sweeteners, I like going with a raw sugar rather than like a white sugar is usually better for a tea. Sugars often mask the flavor of the tea itself and all you taste is sugar, but a raw sugar is usually better. for flavoring. Honey can be good, but depends on the honey, I think. But yeah, I will give it back to Amy. She's waiting usually for his show, but I'm also a huge tea person. So I'll get back and adjust the camera. And we've been about, I think your alarm was for the tea steeping, was it? Was that 5 minutes?
We should be good.
Okay, so I'll hand this back.
All right, I don't have a ton more to add. I agree with all of his tea recommendations. I like all kinds of tea. I'm not picky about tea. I like herbal blends. I like tea with caffeine. But I'm gonna just go ahead and take this out. So that's the end of it. And this is only, I don't really like steeping it more than once. It loses flavor after more than once with herbal blends. But like Xander said, if you're using something that has caffeine in it, a tea that has caffeine, like a black, a green, or a white, that one you can usually steep more than once. So I'm just going to set that over to the side. And I'm going to take this one out too. Okay. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. I hope you use this as an excuse to do something nice for yourself, make yourself a nice meal, make a nice tea for yourself, and everyone have a wonderful evening. If you don't have any questions, I think we might just drink some tea. It's gonna be really hot. Cheers. Whoop.